a millionaire businessman, owner of several thriving companies, was walking through a crowded neighborhood when he suddenly spotted a familiar figure sitting on the sidewalk. A woman with a weary gaze, dressed in rags, surrounded by two little girls, no older than 3, silently crying. His heart pounded as he recognized her. Olivia, his childhood love, the one he had silently admired in school, never daring to approach. After years of silence, he saw her now, in a situation he could never have imagined. He stopped abruptly, his mind clouded with shock and concern. Olivia, plunged into misery, was trying to comfort her daughters, holding them in her arms, but the despair was palpable. He stepped forward cautiously, and after a suspended moment, he murmured her name. She slowly lifted her head, her eyes filled with pain and recognition. He extended his hand, insisting that she follow him, and after a brief hesitation, she accepted. That simple gesture marked the beginning of a new chapter, where compassion and the promise of a better future replaced the anguish of a shattered past. A sequence of astonishing events followed, defying all expectations and opening an unexpected path to redemption and rebuilding. Logan Bennett stopped in his tracks, his eyes locked on the scene unfolding before him. He had everything: money, power, material wealth. But faced with this sight, he suddenly felt powerless. Olivia, the love he had lost sight of years ago, was right there, in a situation that defied everything he had known. He watched her incredulous, as she wiped away the tears of one of her twins, while her other arm reached for the second child. His heart hammering in his chest, he rushed toward her. "Olivia," he called, his voice trembling. She looked up, her surprise quickly turning into recognition. She seemed to want to speak, but the words were stuck in her throat. The woman who had always been his ideal, the one he had lost when their lives took different paths, was now homeless. Fate seemed to be playing a cruel trick on them. Logan knelt before her, struggling to find his words. How did this happen?" he asked. Olivia lowered her head in shame, then looked up at him, her eyes filled with profound disillusionment. She briefly explained how, after a tragic accident, her husband had left them with nothing, forcing them to flee their once comfortable life just to survive. The weight of her words hit Logan like a shockwave. Without thinking, he extended his hand, offering her help, a refuge for her and her children. But despite the despair in her eyes, she hesitated. She had always been proud, and accepting help from a man she thought she had lost forever felt unbearable. Logan felt a dull ache in his chest. He was witnessing a reality far different from the one he was accustomed to. This woman, once full of life and ambition, was now a broken reflection of who she had been. The dried tears on her cheeks and her slumped posture bore the marks of the brutal life she had endured. Logan took a deep breath, trying to remain composed. He had the power to change her situation, but Olivia seemed determined to keep her distance. "Olivia, listen to me. I don't want to force you, but your daughters need help. You've always been strong, but sometimes, accepting help isn't a weakness," Logan insisted, his eyes fixed on her with a kindness he had never expressed before. Olivia held her children tighter, overwhelmed with shame. "I don't want to burden you. You have your life, Logan. And I have nothing to offer," she whispered. She had always been immensely proud, and that pride kept her from accepting help that seemed too great for her. But the distress of her daughters outweighed her pride. Logan knelt before her again, lowering himself to make his presence less imposing. "Olivia, you have children who need you, and you need yourself. Look at them. They need you, but you also need someone. I'm not asking you to erase the past, just to accept support, he said softly. His words rang true even to himself. She had been the girl he had secretly loved, the object of his dreams. And now, life was giving him the chance to support her. He couldn't let her fall further. Olivia swallowed hard, feeling like a stranger in her own life. She had never wanted to end up like this. Depending on a powerful businessman like Logan Bennett seemed almost unreal. Yet, reality was harsh and undeniable. She glanced at her daughters one last time, regret filling her eyes, before turning to Logan. I don't know how to thank you, she murmured, her voice trembling. Logan shook his head. There's nothing to thank me for. You're in need, and it's okay to accept help. He stood up and extended his hand to Olivia, a simple but profoundly compassionate gesture. His eyes never left her daughters, making sure they were safe, that they felt protected. The younger twin, the one who hadn't stopped crying, timidly reached out her tiny hand toward him. A faint smile formed on Logan's lips at the innocent gesture. Don't worry, he said in a soothing voice. We're going to take you somewhere safe. Minutes passed, and soon his driver arrived with the car. Olivia hesitated, feeling an immense weight on her shoulders. She didn't want to be a burden, but reality was crushing her. The girls were exhausted, hungry, and it was too late to turn back. Logan guided them toward the car, his hand gently placed on their heads in a protective gesture. As they settled inside, Olivia turned to look at him. Why are you doing all this for me? She asked, confusion evident in her voice. Logan opened the door and invited Olivia inside. She hesitated for a moment, then stepped in cautiously, holding her daughters close. The interior of the house was spacious and luxurious, bathed in soft lighting. The contrast with the cold, hostile streets she had just left behind was striking. The twins, despite their exhaustion, observed their new surroundings with curious eyes. Come sit down, Logan said, motioning to a large plush sofa. Olivia settled in carefully, as if afraid of dirtying the pristine fabric. The girls, too exhausted to resist, quickly fell asleep against her. Logan watched them for a moment before disappearing into the kitchen. A few minutes later, he returned with a tray holding a bowl of hot soup, some bread, and a steaming cup of tea. You need to eat, he said gently, placing the tray in front of her. Olivia stared at the food, then lifted her gaze to Logan, gratitude mixed with deep hesitation in her eyes. Why are you doing all this, Logan? I'm a stranger to you now. He sighed, sitting across from her. You've never been a stranger to me, Olivia. No matter how much time has passed. A silence settled between them. Olivia lowered her eyes, nervously playing with the edge of the blanket Logan had given her. A silent tear rolled down her cheek. After so many years, after so much suffering, she had never imagined that someone would reach out to her again. Olivia sat on the couch, holding her sleeping daughters close. Her gaze swept over the room, feeling out of place in such comfort. She felt like she no longer belonged in a world like this. Logan sat across from her, studying her tired face. Do you want to tell me what happened? He asked gently. Olivia lowered her eyes. It's not an interesting story. I want to hear it. She took a deep breath. I trusted the wrong person. The girl's father abandoned me when I needed him most. I lost everything, and I ended up on the streets. Logan felt a slow anger rising in him. How could someone abandon Olivia and her daughters? He clenched his fists but forced himself to stay calm. "You're not alone anymore," he said firmly. Olivia looked up at him, uncertain. She wanted to believe his words, but life had taught her not to hope. Yet, as she saw the sincerity in his eyes, a fragile glimmer of hope flickered within her. She got up carefully so as not to wake her daughters and stepped out of the room. In the hallway she hesitated, unsure of where to go. It felt strange to be in such a luxurious house after so many nights spent outside. She slowly descended the stairs and found Logan in the kitchen, a cup of coffee in his hand. He looked up and gave her a tired smile. "You're awake earlier than I expected." "I needed to think," she murmured, lowering her gaze. Logan set his cup down and stepped closer. "Olivia, you don't have to face this alone anymore. I want to help you." She sighed, crossing her arms as if to shield herself. "Why are you doing all this for me?" Logan held her gaze for a moment before answering. "Because I can't stand seeing you suffer. And because I care about you, even after all these years." A silence settled between them. Olivia looked away, unsettled. For so long, she had relied only on herself. Accepting help felt both terrifying and comforting. Before she could respond, Hazel's voice echoed down the hallway. "Mommy." Olivia immediately turned, her maternal instinct kicking in. Logan watched the scene, realizing that no matter what had happened in the past, he would do everything to make sure they never lacked anything again. The twins, still sleepy, stared wide-eyed at the table. Plates filled with pancakes, fresh fruit, scrambled eggs, and orange juice awaited them. Hazel gently tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Is all this for us?" she whispered, as if she couldn't believe it. "Olivia, we need to talk," Logan said in a gentle but firm tone. She slowly set her fork down and looked up at him. "I know." He took a deep breath. "What happened after high school? How did you end up here?" She looked away, her heart tightening. "It's a long story, Logan. I have all the time in the world." She took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long while, she felt like someone was willing to listen. But could she really share her past with him, with everything it entailed? Logan sat across from Olivia, his elbows resting on the table, fingers intertwined. He waited for her to start eating, but she merely played with her fork. "You're safe here, Olivia," he said gently. She finally looked up at him, her gaze filled with both gratitude and apprehension. "I know. But I don't want to be a burden to you." Logan shook his head. "You're not a burden. And I'm not going to let you go back to the streets." She lowered her eyes, struggling against the emotions welling up inside her. "After high school, I followed a man. I thought he loved me. He promised me a beautiful life, but it was all lies." Logan felt a cold fury rising in him. "The girl's father?" he asked. Olivia slowly nodded. "Yes. He abandoned us when Harper and Hazel were barely a year old. I tried to manage on my own, but life became complicated." Logan sighed, his gaze softening. "You don't have to fight alone anymore, Olivia. Let me help you." She hesitated, moved by his sincere words. Could she really trust him after all this time? Logan nodded gently. "Take your time. I'm here to listen." Olivia took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "After high school, I left town with Ethan, the girl's father. At first, everything seemed perfect. He promised me a beautiful life, said that nothing could happen to us as long as we were together. She let out a bitter laugh and shook her head. But those promises were nothing but empty words. Shortly after the twins were born, he changed. He started coming home late, spending all our money, and, sometimes, he became violent. Logan clenched his fists under the table, his gaze darkening. "Did he hurt you?" he asked, his voice tense. Olivia shrugged, avoiding his eyes. "I endured as much as I could for my daughters. But one day, he left and never contacted us again. I tried to survive on my own, taking on small jobs. But when I lost my last job, everything collapsed. I ended up on the streets with Harper and Hazel." Logan felt a mix of anger and sadness rise within him. "You shouldn't have gone through that alone." She gave a small, sad smile. "I had no one." He placed his hand over hers. "Now you have me." Olivia lowered her gaze, lost in painful memories. "I was alone, terrified. My family didn't support me. They told me I had made my choice and had to deal with the consequences. So, I did everything I could to get by. I found a small waitressing job, saved every penny to prepare for the baby's arrival. It wasn't an easy life, but at least I had a roof over my head and a little hope." Logan listened in silence, his heart clenching with every word. He never imagined that Olivia, who once shone so brightly, had endured so much on her own. "But things got worse after the girls were born," Olivia continued. "Harper and Hazel were adorable babies, but the sleepless nights, the lack of money, everything became harder and harder. I did my best, but when my boss sold the restaurant and the new owner decided to lay people off, I lost my job." She took a shaky breath. "Without an income, everything fell apart quickly. I couldn't pay rent, and we were evicted. I knocked on every door, sought help everywhere, but the answer was always the same. Sorry, we can't do anything for you." So we ended up on the streets, trying to survive day by day. Logan felt a deep anger build inside him. "And Jake? He never tried to find out what happened to you and the girls?" She shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "No. He disappeared as if we had never existed." Silence filled the room. Logan fought the urge to track Jake down and make him pay for his abandonment. But for now, that wasn't the priority. He needed to take care of Olivia and the twins. He stood up, walked over to her, and gently took her hands in his. "You're not alone anymore, Olivia. I'm going to help you. I'll give you and the girls a new life." She looked up at him, tears threatening to fall. "Why are you doing all this, Logan? After all these years?" He gave her a soft, sincere smile. "Because I never stopped loving you." Logan could see she was struggling with a whirlwind of emotions. He saw the exhaustion on her face, the fear still lingering in her eyes, but also a flicker of hope she was trying to suppress. He knew she had learned to rely only on herself, to stop expecting help so she wouldn't be disappointed. He slowly moved closer and placed a comforting hand on hers. "Olivia, I don't want you to feel ashamed. What happened to you is not your fault. Life can be unfair, but you don't have to fight alone anymore." She lowered her head, clenching her fists on her lap. "I don't know how to accept all this, Logan. It's too sudden. I've learned not to rely on anyone." "Then learn to trust me," he said softly. "I won't let you down." A silence settled between them. only broken by the distant laughter of the twins playing with the housekeeper. Olivia briefly closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. I want to believe you, Logan. But I'm scared. Scared that this is temporary, that everything will fall apart again. Logan nodded, understanding her fears. I can't erase the past, but I can promise you one thing. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. You and the girls deserve a second chance. Olivia finally met his gaze, and this time, he saw something different. A hesitation, yes, but also an openness, a possibility. All right, she whispered. I'll try. A small smile appeared on Logan's lips. That's all I ask. At that moment, Harper and Hazel ran into the room, laughing. Harper climbed onto her mother's lap, while Hazel looked up at Logan with childlike curiosity. Mommy, can we stay here for a long time? Harper asked timidly. Olivia exchanged a glance with Logan before gently stroking her daughter's hair. Yes, my love. We're staying here. Logan felt a comforting warmth spread through him. This might not be the story they had imagined years ago, but it was a new beginning. And one thing was certain. He would never let Olivia and her daughters face life alone again.